Plants belong to another universe, a silent and seemingly simple world. They make food from sunshine, which in turn feeds the animal kingdom. But what if plants were keeping something from us? What if they have minds? What if they are intelligent? Scientists are asking these very questions. Do they perceive their environment? Do they have a memory? Could they have a nervous system? To these men and women, the great divide between the plant and animal world is not that great at all.
The Americans have sequenced human DNA, 26,000 genes. The problem is that a few years later we sequenced the genome of rice, 50,000 genes. That gave us a cold chill, and many biologists thought we would have to abandon the idea that the more genes an organism had, the more evolved it was.
We generally consider intelligence as a combination of things: the perception of our environment and the ability to react to it, having a memory, being able to communicate, interact socially, and having a brain to coordinate it all. The pea plant's outer surface is covered with sensors that send a signal to the cells below. The stimulated cells grow less rapidly than the outer ones, causing it to twist around whatever it touches. This is what allows the pea plant to grow in all directions, stretching out, feeling the world around it, grabbing hold, creating the foundations for the rest of the plant to follow. Another fast-moving plant is the sensitive. Water pressure against the cell walls keeps its leaves stiff. When it's pinched or stroked, the water pressure drops and the plant quickly sags. The exact reason why is not known, but the sudden movement from a touch could be a defense mechanism, frightening insects that land on it. Fast-moving plants are uncommon. We mostly see them as static, but this is only because we look at them through human time.
What are the animals that live the longest? I think it's the giant turtles. They live 3 centuries. This seems a long time to us, but for a plant, it's no time at all. There are millions of 3,000-year-old plants. They can live much longer than that. For example, a protesea from Tasmania, the king's holly, can live for 43,000 years.
Scientific studies about plants began less than 100 years ago. In the 1920s, Indian botanist Jagadish Chandra Bose tried to show that plants not only had sensations, but some kind of consciousness. He was well ahead of his time, using electricity to stimulate plants. He launched pioneering research into plant growth and plant reaction to electromagnetic waves. But what about sound? The Desmodium gyrans is commonly known as the dancing plant, in the strict sense of the word.
If you make a noise, you'll see the leaves of this plant move incessantly. But you know, if you touch it instead of making a sound, it doesn't move at all. Actually, it's sound that it's sensitive to. So for us scientists, this is a great problem. For 2 reasons. Firstly, because we don't know how it works. Secondly, and this is perhaps worse, we don't know what it's for.
A plant's going to react on nutrients that is transported by fluid, by water through the root system. It's going to react on light, that is the stimulus for photosynthesis. And it's going to react on damage and infections. So if you've got damage by eating or infections by plant viruses, you break down plant tissues and the plants react on that. They immediately produce some kind of antibodies, and they start reacting against that. It's in the human body, you find the same thing.
If the natural process of sleep is prevented, then after 2 weeks the plant starts to turn yellow. It then withers, and in the end, the plant dies. We cannot draw any conclusions. The experiment was inconclusive as to whether the plant died as a result of hygrometry dysfunction because its biological clock was disturbed. We still don't really understand why plants need sleep.
Experiments in Germany and Japan show that plants react to the outside world and communicate through chemistry. The acacia and oak have even used it to develop social skills. If we accept these abilities in plants, then we have to ask if plants have another essential criteria for intelligence, like memory, being able to retain and recall an event, and learn from it. If we take the case of the dancing plant, then there is little doubt that plants have memory.
If you take a dancing plant from the wild that's never had the opportunity to dance because it's too young or came from a quiet area and try to make it dance, then it doesn't do it very well. It moves a little bit, but clearly doesn't do what you'd like it to do. But then, train it to dance day after day, and you'll be surprised to find that day after day it will dance a little better, to the point where it becomes an exceptional ballerina, and it will stay that way. This plant is capable of something that sports people would call training, and that is based on memory.
In Germany, Professor Volkmann has found that pea seedlings have the capacity for memory.
Here we have 2 pea plants, and we like to investigate if they have a memory and how long this memory is lasting.
Professor Volkmann puts the seedlings in a horizontal position. Up is no longer up, but sideways. If the plants were left in this position, they would work out where up is and start growing in a new direction. The root system of some algae works in a similar way. The filaments responsible for keeping the plant in balance are transparent, so the effect can be clearly seen under the microscope. The trapped granules are called statolites, and they are made up of minerals and, being heavier, tell the plant which way is down. We have a similar system in the ear to help us keep our balance. After 30 minutes, Professor Volkmann cools the seedlings down to 4 degrees Celsius, putting them in a suspended state of animation. He wants to see if they'll remember having been put on their sides. After several days, the young peas are taken out of the refrigerator and brought back to room temperature to wake up.
So, after warming up the temperature from 4 degrees in the refrigerator to 22 degrees in the laboratory, we see nicely the response of both plants. They know exactly where up and down was. They remember their stimulation before the weekend, so at least 4 to 5 days. And we see that the response is a little bit different between the 2 plants, which means the one is better with their remembrance, with their memory, than this one.
The experiment shows that plants have a perception and memory of the space around them. A dancing plant can be trained, building on previous experience. A carnivorous plant will retain the memory of a specific insect's touch for a short time in case another is nearby. The acacia will remember the kudu's overgrazing for over an hour. plants have developed ways to store memory different to ours in a way that we don't as yet fully understand. It has allowed them to learn from the past, plan for the future, and work together for the benefit of the species.
The word memory has been used for many different systems. We speak of human memory and we speak of computer memory, which is not the same thing. We speak of memory for the inferior animals. In that case, it's yet another system. And we can even speak of memory for plants, as different authors and scientists have done. What we mean by memory is the capability to store a certain signal for a certain period of time, and in some experiments, the capability to recall that signal with another signal.
It's difficult for us to imagine that memory can be stored outside a brain. Could plants have some kind of central nervous system that we don't quite understand? And if so, where would it be? An audacious idea was proposed in the late 1800s. To understand its origins, we need to use our own memories and go back to where it started. Back to Victorian England and the great biologist Charles Darwin. Darwin's theories on the evolution of species revolutionized the field of biology and changed the way we look at our place in the animal kingdom. But Darwin's contribution to science was much more. In his country retreat in Kent, Darwin experimented on carnivorous and climbing plants. He put forth a daring idea that plant activity was not limited to growth.
Charles Darwin, in his book, speculated on the possibility of there being a root brain, because in Darwin's formulation, the brain was associated with bending movements of roots. We had discovered a special zone just behind the root tip, which seemed to suggest that this region has really some extraordinary physiology in there.
Charles Darwin turned the scientific community on its head, and his writings still resonate today. Darwin started with the fact that plants feed through their roots, just like the head of an animal. A plant's roots would act as a central nervous system. This is what we call root brains theory. The plant keeps its head in the ground and displays its sexual organs to the outside world. In the 1990s, researchers at the University of Bonn discovered unusual activity in a particular part of the root that they dubbed the zone of transition. Here they found cells containing molecules such as lactin and myosin. The fascinating thing about these molecules is that they are the same found in muscle cells that enable animals to move. The cells in the zone of transition may be very different, but they function in the same way as synapse, the nerve connections in animals that allow neurons in the brain to create circuits with other neurons, as well as muscle and gland cells. It's these synapse connections between cells that allow the complex interchange of information in our bodies, as well as perception, memory, and thought. Current research in plant physiology confirms Darwin's intuitions and ideas. The root system is not only used to feed, but it explores space with purpose and intelligence. The roots process complex information, much like the nervous system of vertebrates. If we look at how plants function and compare it to the animal world, it may not be as different as we'd like to think. Scientists are quick to point out that plants do not have a brain or a nervous system. But at the same time, they will say that there are huge similarities at the structural and molecular levels with that of a vertebrate's nervous system. Cells may be very different, but they function very much like neurons and synapses that form circuits. The mechanics of how it's done may be different, but the results are almost identical. Plants need to perceive their environment and act intelligently to make the right choices in order to survive.
So we can say that the difference between plants and animals, or at least between plants and inferior animals, is not that big when you really look at the cellular and molecular levels.
These claims may seem reasonable, but the world of science is skeptic by nature.
These days it is of course difficult because this field is still not officially accepted, so the mainstream is still not convinced about this idea. So in science it is normal, it is just usual. Science is very conservative and it takes a lot of time to make really breakthrough changes and advances.
The idea of plants having intelligence is a contradiction to our worldview. But at the same time, it is deeply consistent with the theory of evolution. All life has branched out from one center, rippling out, finding its own way to earn the right to live and pass on its genetic inheritance. What is true of animals is true of plants. There are superior plants, endowed with greater capability for perception, memory, and communication than others. In other words, with varying degrees of intelligent behavior. If we ask who is superior, animal or plant, then at least, in the Limpopo savanna, the answer is clear. The threatened acacia tree kills the starving kudu. And what if we went a little further and associated survival with intelligence? And we ask who will be around the longest? Then, the answer could be a little disconcerting.